I'll go ahead and get started, I guess. My name is Bree Harms, and I am a current John Deere employee. My family and I live just barely north of the Quad Cities in a small town called Eldridge, Iowa. And I've got a sixth grader and an eighth grader. We do have a junior high program here. So my son Carter, who will be a freshman next year, actually got to compete this year at his first ever career development event. And so that was pretty awesome to see him do here, Ag CSI. I did grow up in Eastern Illinois. I served as the 1997 1998 state FFA secretary and originally from Manteno up in Section 10, so about 40 miles south of Chicago. Super excited to have been invited back by the Illinois FFA to do a career corner, ag career corner here. So with that, I would gladly welcome questions from anyone who is here. Otherwise, I can give you guys a little bit more career background as some of those questions roll in. So a little more background about myself. As I mentioned, I grew up in Eastern Illinois. After my state officer year, I went to the University of Illinois and I got my undergrad degree in agribusiness, farm, and financial management. And then I stuck around and I got my master's and my teaching certificate in agricultural education. I spent some time working in the College of ACES Office of Advancement when I was on campus as a student at Illinois. And then I had 2 internships with John Deere, one between my junior and senior year, and then one between my senior year and my grad school year. I student taught at Gibson City, Melvin Sibley, and then started my career with John Deere full-time in 2003 with them. The first question came in, thank you, from Emma. So Emma asked, what is the most challenging part of my position? So Emma, I'll give you guys a little bit more background about what it is that I do now, and then that will help me to explain the most challenging part of my position. So I spent the first 13 and a half years of my career with John Deere on the ag and turf side of the business, which is very much where I was comfortable. My ag teacher was amazing in high school, and then I spent time, like I said, in ag business and ag ed at Illinois. I just moved about 3.5 years ago over to the construction and forestry division, and I also left marketing and sales, and I went to what we call customer support. So I manage a team of 8 people that work with John Deere dealers in the Midwest, the kind of Mid-South, I would say, all the way down to Houston, Texas, and then the Southeast down to Florida and up to DC. And those folks work with our dealers to develop them. And those folks also work with customers who were experiencing some unresolvable problems or challenging situations. So Emma, your question is, what's the most challenging part of my position? And I would say there's a couple. So first of all, I'm in a place that's kind of uncomfortable for me, being in construction and forestry rather than ag and turf. And so stepping outside of my comfort zone was one of the most challenging parts about coming to this position, both coming to construction and forestry and then not having a technical background, but managing people who work with our dealers and customers on technical issues. I think the other piece, Emma, that's the most challenging so far for going back to that question that you asked is really having to force myself to figure out how to productively have uncomfortable conversations, difficult conversations, whether it's with a dealer or with a John Deere customer, or even internally if we need to make some changes. Illinois FFA Megan asked, did I always know that I wanted to go into agriculture? And I certainly didn't. So I grew up out in the country, but not on a farm. My dad he was a self-employed contractor. He custom built homes. And then my mom was a secretary in the school system for a really long time. And didn't know I always wanted to go into ag as a career, but my dad, my uncle, and both my brothers were FFA members. And Mr. Schnitzler was my ag teacher. And when I was an 8th grader, we had about 370 kids in our high school, and there was 110 FFA members. It was just what you did. It didn't matter what walk of life you came from. It was just what you did. And so I knew that I wanted to take ag ed in high school, but I didn't know until I got further along in my experience as an FFA that I wanted to truly pursue a career in agriculture. So Keely asked, do you have a background in ag? And so as I mentioned, I grew up out in the country, but not on a farm. My SAE was I worked at one of our neighbors used to have a specialty crop farm. And so My very first part of my SAE, starting when I was probably 13 or 12, maybe in 8th grade, I used to accompany our neighbor up on Saturday mornings to the Chicago farmers markets, and I would help sell fruits and vegetables. And occasionally we would go to Wheaton, and I would help sell baked goods at that one as well. And then from there, the rest of my SAE transitioned to, I worked at Jewel Osco in Bourbonnais, Illinois. So I was a cashier, I was a bagger. They put me in the flower shop because I took lots of horticulture classes in high school. And then they also had me in the bake shop and the deli there, sort of a jack of all trades. But truly I grew up with a love for agriculture because of what my high school ag ed teacher developed in me because of how he invested in us. Emma asked, what advice would you give to FFA members who are interested in your career path? So I'll step back and give you guys a little bit more information about the path I followed when I came to John Deere. So John Deere, whether you go into engineering or finance or supply management or marketing and sales, we tend to have what we would call development programs. So I came into they call it the marketing rep development program. I spent the first year of my career at Deere and Company in Moline, parts and service marketing. And then I spent about 6 months out on the road, field shadowing. And then my husband and I, we were married at the time. We then moved to Western Kansas. We lived in Hayes. I would challenge all of you guys to find that on a map. It is smack dab between Denver and Kansas City. It was about 12 or 13 hours from home. It was a great experience to live out there. We lived there for about a year and a half. Then we lived in Kansas City for about 2 years, where I helped dealers in the upper Midwest work on their parts and service sales and parts and service profitability. And then from there, I moved to Northwest Iowa with my family, and I was a territory sales manager. Then we moved to near Des Moines, and I worked for John Deere Financial for the first time. I'm still working with ag and turf dealers, but as a division finance manager. So I managed folks who are calling on dealers, helping to grow our business with John Deere Financial to help position John Deere Financial and our employees as trusted advisors of our dealer channel. And then if any of your families farm and they happen to have an R4030, R4038, R4045, or R4023 sprayer, I was managing a team of folks that was working in the Des Moines works when we were developing and bringing those products to market. Then I moved out of my comfort zone into an IT role, and then I moved here. And so, Emma, you asked, what advice would you give members who are interested in your career path? I think one, be flexible, right? If you think about it, each of those moves was up until my current role, every maybe 18 to 24 months, John Deere would give me different opportunities that really challenged me and stretched me to do something different, but something that was an extension of what I'd done before. If I wouldn't have been flexible and been willing to try those things, Emma, it would have been difficult for me to have been able to continue to advance in my career. So the other thing I would say, at least in my experience, is in a marketing, sales, or customer support role with John Deere, it's been very important for my family and I to be relatively willing to relocate. My children, my husband and I are still married. He's the lead fundraiser for the College of Engineering at Iowa State. Our kids moved, well, we moved 6 times in our first 8 years of marriage, which that was kind of a lot. But now we're going to probably be here in the Quad Cities until our 6th and 8th grader are done with high school. But early on, we were very flexible and took advantage of the opportunities from the company. So again, I think flexibility and willingness to relocate if you want to get into a development program in marketing, sales, or customer support with John Deere would be very good. Avery just asked a great question. From your perspective, how can FFA members continue to serve and impact others during this unusual time? And so, I think the number one thing, obviously, is the health and protection of each of you as FFA members. And then I think also making sure that you're following whatever the social distancing requirements are locally at the county level or at the state level. But from there, I think just having a servant heart is important. I even think about some of the things, one of our local neighbors here in Eldridge, they just decided to do a social distancing service project. And so they grabbed some garbage bags and they grabbed some gloves and they cleaned up one of the local ditches. So something as simple as that. And then I think the other piece that I would encourage people to think about as FFA members is there are likely people in your community who yearn for contact from people, even if it's socially distanced contact. And so think about if there, for instance, is a retirement village in your area. I'm sure you probably can't go in, but could you decorate windows from the outside? If there is somebody that you could work with, could you do tic-tac-toe with dry erase markers on a window and with some blue painter's tape, for example? But I think other than that, really just thinking about implementing a servant heart and thinking about what you can do by yourself or with those that live in the home with you to positively affect your community. Even as simple as raking mulch back around the school or taking care of the lawn mowing or something of that nature for somebody who might be at risk given their physical health condition. Keely asked, while serving the Illinois FFA, did a certain experience or moment change my life? That is a great question, Keely. Thanks for asking that. Man, I don't know how to explain what that state officer year was like. I was fortunate. So the year before us was the first year that there were 5 officers. Prior to that, there were always just 4 officers. So my year was a second year that there were 5 of us. And I can honestly tell you that though I'm not always in touch with the other 4 individuals, they are still a critically important part of my life. But when I really think about a certain experience or moment that changed my life, I would say there's a subset of them. And it was somehow during my state officer year, I just, when I did chapter visits, I was in sort of West Central Illinois, just south of the Quad Cities, and I really got to know an FFA chapter very, very well, and it was Alexis, Illinois. Brian Sirks was their ag teacher, and so I did chapter visits over here. I did their leadership training school for the section over here. I spoke at their banquet, and I just remember probably one of the most impactful pieces besides the very end of my retiring address and besides the time that I got to recognize my parents and advisor on the stage was at the end of my retiring address. Those students and their advisor from Alexis walked up on stage and they brought me a gift and they brought me some flowers. And that was very uncommon, but it was something that just made me realize that there were truly deep friendships that were developed during that year and that I made a difference in the lives of those FFA members, which was pretty awesome. Keely also asked, how have your day-to-day experiences changed at my job since the pandemic? And that's a good question. One thing I didn't explain to all of you is that the job that I'm in right now actually posted at 75% travel. I don't tend to travel quite that much, but there are periods of the year where it wouldn't be uncommon for me to be gone 4 to 5 days for each of the weeks in the month. And the other piece is the folks that I manage, they all work remotely. So I've got those 8 team members that work. One of them lives near Houston. I've got another one that lives in Miami. And so as we have gone to social distancing and many states have shut down, certainly there's all of the people I manage have had to change the way that they work with and support our dealers, just as our dealers are having to change the way that they work with and support their customers. And then for me, right, normally I'd be out traveling. Certainly I'm going to go 3.5 months without getting on an airplane. I did have to go just earlier this week, or I guess late last week, excuse me, had to hop in the car and go visit an at-risk customer. It was very, very different. We didn't shake hands. We were wearing masks. We all had 6 feet between us. It was still a very good discussion, but much, much different than what I would have otherwise experienced. But I can tell you that right now, my husband and I have talked about it, and we're confident that in the nearly 18 years of our marriage, this is the longest that the 2 of us in our family have ever been all together without either of us traveling. But I think, yeah, so Keely, the biggest changes for me is that I'm not traveling, which means I'm more available to my employees. My employees aren't traveling and they're rethinking how they're working with dealers. And then I'm also having to rethink how I work with my dealers and my team members. So what skills or qualities do you need to have to be successful in a job like my job? And thank you very much for asking that question, Illinois FFA. And by the way, my sister-in-law is on here. Shout out to Angie. I see that. That's pretty fun, as are my 2 nieces, Ainsley and Ashlyn. They're Prairie Central FFA members. So yeah, what skills or qualities do you need to have to be successful in a job like mine? And I'm going to start by saying I think there are some it's some skills and qualities that you need to be successful in any job. And then maybe I'll talk a little bit specifically about my job. So I think it's critically important, regardless of the job that you're in, that you have good decision-making skills. I think you need to also have good communication skills, and you need to be a self-starter. It doesn't matter what job you're in, what company you work for, even if you're working for yourself. Having those three things is critically important. And then when I think about kind of the rest of the story about my job specifically, some of the things that I think have been good for me or beneficial to me is that I've worked really hard to have a solid decision-making process. And so I don't always say I make the best decisions, but in general, I try in a somewhat quick manner to realize when a decision needs to be made, to think about in a kind of a rigorous way what alternatives there are that could get to a result. And I try pretty quickly to think through the pros and cons of that. Now, depending on how important the decision is, I'll probably spend more or less time working through that. But in my mind, again, one thing that's aided me is having that rigorous decision-making process that's repeatable, because then I always, no matter how much pressure's on, I've gotten that orderly process in my mind so I can implement it and make a decision that's based on, ideally, on fact and logic versus just emotion. So let me scroll up. I'll do some other thinking about that on other skills or qualities in addition to the four that I've mentioned. But I would say, I guess one other one, when I think about people who have asked me about career advice inside of John Deere, another thing I often tell folks is that you should make sure that you can organize your life or organize yourself in a way that you can work through all of those, what I call them, the firefighting things that are coming at you all the time, but still know the things that are most important to you, whether it's personally or for your job, that you can keep your foot on the gas for those as well. Because what happens otherwise, it's super easy to get bogged down in all of the firefighting. And then if you lose sight of the really big things that you or your employees or your dealers, for instance, for me, need to be working on, it's really difficult then to make some of the truly necessary step function changes that you need to make in order to be truly effective in your job. So let me scroll down a little bit. Oh man, biggest piece of life or career advice. I've had to do some thinking about this because Carter, my 8th grader, when he was in 6th grade, I needed to go and do a career day for his class. And so I prepared this whole PowerPoint because that's what we do, right, in the John Deere world. And at the very end, I got asked a very similar question by the counselor at the school. And I honestly believe in life and in careers, one of the most important things to do is just be brave. And I think about, again, whether it's when you're in high school, maybe it's trying a new career development event, or maybe it's taking a class that interests you, but perhaps none of your friends are interested in taking that class. Maybe it's going to a conference that's far away, or maybe when you get to college, like me, I changed my major like 4 or 5 times trying to figure out where I could best fit. And if I hadn't done those things, or if FFA members or people in a business professional sense don't do things that kind of giving themselves space to be brave, they might get comfortable and may not reach their full potential. So food for thought on that one anyway. The biggest piece of life or career advice is just be brave. That doesn't mean be stupid or be crazy or throw all caution to the wind, but be brave. Ainsley asked, what makes a career in agriculture business different from other careers in agriculture, like ag communications or ag marketing? Thanks for asking that question. And so it's kind of interesting because sometimes things sort of all fit together, right? So for me, for the types of jobs that I have done inside of John Deere for most of my career, a lot of that time has been spent with John Deere dealers. And I don't know how if folks understand the relationship between John Deere and our dealers, but our dealers are not franchises. It's not like a local, maybe McDonald's Subway, where they pay a franchise fee and then we let them put the logo on. They're not franchises or franchisees. We actually have a dealer agreement that governs our business with them, and they're independent business owners. And one of the things that I realized pretty quickly in my career working with dealers is that ultimately, though my jobs might say I was in sales, territory sales manager or area manager of parts and service sales, I never really sell anything to dealers. What I do ultimately is I serve as a business consultant to them. And so going back to your question, Ainsley, this career in ag business, for the experience I'm having at John Deere, I'm applying what I learned in my agribusiness, farm, and financial management undergrad degree. And so I'm applying that by serving as a business consultant. So sometimes it's helping dealers think about profitability. Sometimes it's helping dealers think about talent planning and figuring out how many technicians or part sales people they need. Sometimes it's helping dealers think about how to combat the competition or their mission, vision, values. All of those are things that I learned as an undergrad at Illinois working in my ag business degree. Now, there are others who do a job similar to me, or others who perhaps work on my team, and instead of studying ag business in college, they studied ag marketing, or one of my employees actually has an ag communications degree, but here she is still serving in that business consultant sort of role. So for me, when I think of ag business, it's understanding some of the things like the accounting and the finance, decision making, competitive advantage, and the kind of marketing in terms of pricing, promotion, product, and things. Then when we think about careers in agriculture like ag communications or ag marketing, the folks that I can think of that are more in a true ag communication type of a role sometimes work for advertising firms. Some of my friends with ag com degrees work at the University of Illinois in either communications, fundraising, or alumni relations. And I've got some friends who are ag com majors who are professional photographers, or they're self-employed working in their own marketing firm. And then the last piece that you had asked about, Ainsley, was kind of around ag marketing, and that piece maybe could have two different takes on it. So some of it, there's maybe ag marketing like tactical marketing, delivering product to the marketplace, but sometimes ag marketing might be truly like commodity trading. And so lots of different things to think about there. Avery asked, what are productive ways for members to explore careers if they're unsure what exactly they'd like to do? Avery, that's a really good question. And again, you're asking a question of a young lady who is undecided at Illinois. I changed my major 5 times before my junior year, and it wasn't until second semester of my junior year that I figured out that ag business is where I needed to be. So some food for thought for you, and I learned some of this from my husband. First of all, don't be afraid to take an unpaid internship when you are going either through high school or in college, or do some job shadowing. But I would encourage you, Avery, if you're going to do job shadowing, really sit down and think about good questions like what you guys are asking me right now. All of these questions will be great questions, like in-depth questions to ask the person that you're going to shadow. And ask those people things about what did they enjoy? Why did they choose this career path, et cetera, so that you can figure out if maybe it's something that would be appealing for you. So I think 1, unpaid internships or 2, job shadowing would be good. And then the other thing that I think that's really important is finding someone that you trust who will invest in you and mentor you. And for me, that person actually came at the University of Illinois. It was one of the assistant deans in academic programs. And it's that person, he is the reason that I ended up in ag business, because if you can find someone to be a mentor to you, whether it's formal or informal. So for somebody that might be your ag teacher, or it might be somebody from your community who maybe graduated and is in college. It may be somebody who babysat you when they were little and now they're either back home or maybe they're out of the real world. But talking to those people, it will help you. And the final thing I would suggest relative to career exploration is this is something I always encourage people that talk to me at work about doing, is make a list of things you enjoy, make a list of things that you don't enjoy, and make a list of things where you think you could make a difference. And it's easy for me at John Deere to encourage someone to think about doing that, because when you do that, instead of thinking about job titles that you think you want, think about the things that you're good at, think about the things you enjoy, and then working with that person who can be a mentor for you or an advocate for you, sitting down and talking with them, they may be able to help you explore careers that you didn't even know about. And that's the value of thinking about it in those three segments rather than thinking, oh, what are the job titles that I need to be thinking about? So, hello, Jennifer Herman Waters. It's good to see you as a former state officer on here as well. What other questions do folks on here have? I'm super pleased to see that there's 21 smiling faces here, by the way. Any other questions? If not, Megan Coy, should I think about wrapping up, or do you have anything else that you'd like me to toss in? So Jennifer just asked, speaking of things you enjoy, how do you find time to do things for yourself and your family? That's a really good question, Jennifer. So Jennifer and I are friends on Facebook, and I've known her since she was a high school student at Taylorville, I think, if I remember, maybe, Jennifer. And sometimes at work, in the midst of all the travel, it's really difficult to find time to do things that we enjoy, especially as the kids have gotten older. What I've come to realize that I really enjoy is watching our kids be happy. And so for our kids, what makes them happy is playing sports, and that includes a lot of weekend tournaments and travel and lots of practices. And then the other thing I think that has been pretty fun for me, probably since Addison was 5 years old. So yeah, and she's 12 now. So over the course of the last 7 years, one of the things that has allowed me to, I don't know that we ever find time to do things we enjoy, but coaching sports for the kids, for the sports that I'm familiar with. So for me, that's soccer and volleyball, has been a fun way for me to get to spend time with the kids and be active. And we've figured out a way to do it through some of the cooperation of other parents that even in the midst of my travel schedule, we're able to do those things. And one other thing is I've been a lot more deliberate here recently of saying no to things so that I can carve out time for my family and for the things that are truly, truly important to me. And just trying to really be grounded in that. Actually, a few years ago, so back in 2014, I made a list of 27 things that I wanted to do, either me or with my family, before I die. It wasn't necessarily a bucket list. It wasn't like big, grandiose things all of the time, but I'm amazed as I look back at that list and see things that were really important to me or that I thought were really important to me in 2014, and realizing that as a family, we have checked some of those things off, including watching the kids and I watching my husband run the Boston Marathon and watching him run the Chicago Marathon and going to Washington, D.C. and going to some national parks. Those were all things in 2014 I wrote down that we had never done before. And now we've checked them off and gotten to do it. So Avery asked, what's something that I'm learning right now? And so one thing that I do think that I'm learning right now, as are many of you, is I'm learning the importance of flexibility, and I'm learning how it's been very interesting working for a Fortune 100 company in the midst of what's going on here, particularly because John Deere is such a large presence in the Quad Cities and in various cities in the state of Iowa. So it's been pretty amazing to me. One that I've learned is the importance of thought leadership in a large company to make sure that the company is doing the right thing, not just for its employees, but also for its local area. So that was thinking about how much our leadership has had to put in place to protect us and to protect the communities in which we work has been very good. And then the other piece, as I'd started to say, is flexibility and adaptation. So as I'd mentioned, my job's I'm supposed to travel 75% of the time, but I can't travel right now, and it's going to be 3.5 months without me traveling. And so we are definitely learning right now how to work differently with our dealers and how I can work differently with my employees and still be effective and still maintain those connections. And I think the other piece that is always a learning, something I'm learning, Avery, is just how important it is to be personally connected to the people that you work with. Especially right now, right? Because there's a lot of John Deere employees who are working from home and their children are with them or their spouse is with them. And so sometimes I hear a baby crying in the background, or sometimes I see a dog race pot by. And that's been, it's been pretty fun to see the personal side of my team members and my colleagues. Ashlyn said, if I'm not planning to pursue a career in agriculture, how might you suggest I best stay involved in the industry and make a difference? That's another, I think that's a great question, Ash. Thanks for asking that. And I think the biggest thing is, if you know that agriculture is something about which you are passionate, wherever you go, just know a couple things, right? There may be an ag program there, especially if you come back to Prairie Central. And even if you're not in agriculture, there is always a need for concerned and caring individuals to help ag teachers, to help FFA members, and honestly, to even help engage at younger levels to ensure some level of ag literacy for younger people. In fact, all those moves that my husband and I and our kids made, one of the first things that I did every town that we moved to is I'd email the ag teacher and say, hey, we're moving to town. I'm a past state officer. I got a lot of passion and I've got capacity to help. How can I help? And so my husband and I helped to raise $20,000 for the first town we lived in so that they could buy a greenhouse for themselves. When we moved to Northwest Iowa, I helped the local ag teacher, help some FFA members get ready for sort of officer interviews and sat on the panel there. And then here, actually, the night that we came to look at our first house in Eldridge, we actually went over to the high school and met with the ag teacher just so my kids could meet that person and that person could know that I could be a resource. So all that being said, Ash, I would suggest connecting with ag teachers or ag in the classroom instructors, extension agents, or your local farm bureau to figure out ways to engage locally. And then the other piece, depending on if you are engaged in agriculture, I do know that the young farmers and ranchers, they have a collegiate discussion meet, and then they have a young farmer discussion meet as well. And I've had individuals who are friends of mine compete at that at the state level and then at the national level, and it's been something that's been really fulfilling for them. So with that, guys, I think Megan had asked earlier, sort of what's that one piece of advice that you would give, whether from a career standpoint or a life standpoint. And I just want to reiterate to all of you that it's the importance of being brave. There's a movie, I don't know if you guys would have ever watched it, but it's called We Bought a Zoo. And there's a line in there that Matt Damon uses, and he just says, it just takes 5 seconds of bravery. Again, don't do things that are not kind of a disregard for your health or safety, but when it comes time to make a decision, it just takes 5 seconds of bravery. Push yourself out of your comfort zone, because what you'll find, again, whether it's going to talk to a new person, taking a different class, doing a different major in college than what people might think that you might do, all of those things could help you figure things out in a way that if you stayed 100% in your comfort zone, you might not otherwise be able to do. So with that, I think I just sign off. Thanks everybody for doing this. And I just want to recognize the Illinois Association FFA for having thought to do this and for connecting with FFA members around the country in a unique and innovative way that adds huge value. And kudos to everyone who is on here asking really good questions. I look forward to being connected with you at any point. Stay safe, everyone, and continue to do all the great things you're doing, because you guys are the future of agriculture. Thanks.